The day my wife was buried, before the funeral flowers had even begun to wilt, my daughter pointed to the yard and said, in front of everyone, into a microphone, under camera lights, and with the neighbors recording stories on their phones, "Dad, the doghouse out there is still empty. That's probably a better fit for you than Mom's bedroom." The entire room went dead silent. Then came a few quiet laughs, sharp, cold, like needles pricking the ear. I said nothing. I simply bent down, picked up my grease-stained wedding ring, slipped it into my pocket, and told myself, "All right, let's see who really ends up sleeping in the doghouse." If you've ever been humiliated by your own family, pushed out of your own home, and chosen silence because you believe the truth doesn't need to shout to be heard, leave a single in the comments. And if you believe that justice doesn't need to scream, it only needs someone patient enough to wait for it to appear. Hit subscribe, because I still have more stories to tell. Stories that begin with an insult under bright lights and end with silence so loud it forces the guilty to face themselves. That evening in Long Beach there was no wind, but the air inside my house felt heavy as molten steel. The smell of lilies and cleaning solution mixed with the cold glow of temporary lights. It didn't feel like a funeral, it felt like an exhibit. My daughter Sabrina had turned her mother's memorial into a showroom of legacy. A backdrop printed with "A Modern Legacy," an MC reading from a script, 2 cameras sweeping across the living room. On the table, Margaret's photo sat between white roses, the glass frame blinding under LED light. I stood quietly in the corner, holding a cup of coffee gone cold. Relatives whispered. My old co-workers from Aerodyne Components were more silent than usual. Luis, my neighbor and colleague through 3 plant supervisors, rested a hand on my shoulder and nodded gently. His eyes seemed to say, "Martin, hold on." I smiled faintly. After 32 years on the factory floor, I was used to seeing fluorescent light reflect on tired faces. Only this time, that light revealed something worse: pretension. Sabrina, in a black dress, stood at the center of the room like a presenter. Her voice was clear, each sentence ending with a rehearsed smile. My mother believed that legacy isn't wealth, but inspiration. I watched her not for what she said, but for her eyes. They never turned to her mother's photo, nor searched for me in the crowd. Noah, her husband, stood beside her in an open-collar white shirt, wearing the smug grin of a real estate broker used to selling charm. His gaze drifted across the room as though appraising the walls. When the guests began leaving, I was about to step outside for air, when Noah grabbed the microphone. His voice oozed warmth, like watered-down whiskey. "Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. This isn't just to remember Margaret, but also a chance to reorganize a few things." He paused. I saw the cameras adjust, lenses pointed squarely at him. Then he turned toward me, still smiling, and said clearly, "Dad, I've got a simple idea. The house feels a little crowded, and you like peace. I remember you always said, 'All I need is a roof over my head.' Well, the doghouse out back is still empty. It has a roof, a floor, and it's clean. You could stay there for a while. It just fits." He dragged the last 2 words out. The room froze. I heard someone gasp, a glass clink, a chair scrape the floor. A few younger guests exchanged uneasy looks, half smiling. The older ones bowed their heads, refusing to meet my eyes. Sabrina whispered, "Noah, stop it." But she didn't take the microphone away. He shrugged, turned back to the cameras, and said lightly, "Just kidding. Dad knows I love him. A man in his doghouse. It kind of fits, doesn't it?" I didn't respond. Back in the factory, when machinery jammed, I'd pause and listen to the metal's vibration to find the fault. Now I could hear the same vibration, the offbeat laughter of a few guests, the scrape of a chair, Luis's heavy sigh in the corner. Humiliation has its own frequency, dense, metallic, and it rings for a long time. I glanced toward the window. Out on the lawn sat the doghouse I'd built years ago for Lucky. Faded tin roof, one hinge rusted through. On top was a new white sign scrawled in black marker. Temporary residence. The sunset hit the word residence, its ink bleeding like oil on concrete. One of Sabrina's friends stood nearby, snapping photos. Noah leaned toward him and muttered, "Good angle. Caption it, new arrangements." His laughter cracked through the room like metal striking metal inside a running machine. I looked at that doghouse, each plank I sawed, each nail I hammered, and felt the cold rise in my chest. They hadn't just mocked my place in this house, they had mocked my hands, the hands that built it, that repaired every pipe, every door. And now, in my wife's memorial, I was being lowered to the same level as what I once fed. Sabrina approached quietly. "I just want things to be easier to explain, Dad. You know, the house is under Mom's name. I'll handle the paperwork later." I looked her straight in the eye. She looked away. I nodded once. No anger, no words, no reaction. What broke inside me wasn't pride. It was the last belief that someone in this family still remembered what boundaries meant. I walked through the crowd. The scent of perfume, lilies, and cold food mingled into something thick and nauseating. People stepped aside. No one met my gaze. In the kitchen corner, the MC was still mumbling about the beauty of legacy. I barely heard him. I only heard my footsteps on the hardwood floor, dry and hollow. The bedroom was unchanged. Afternoon light streamed through the window, dust floating in the air. Margaret's blanket was neatly folded on the bed, her lotion scent still lingering. I sat down, hands on my knees, breathing slowly. When the sound of the cameras in the living room finally stopped, I opened the bottom drawer. Behind a wooden panel sat the small safe, where Margaret and I kept important papers. The old 4-digit code still worked. Amid insurance forms and our marriage certificate was a cream envelope, her handwriting slanted and gentle. "Open after the noise ends." I held it in my palm. The only sound was the steady ticking of the clock, after the noise ends. She knew. She knew there would be a day like this. I slid the envelope into my vest pocket, closed the safe, and stood. Outside, someone laughed again, a hollow sound like pipes clanging. I placed a hand over my chest, where the envelope brushed against my heart. In my mind, the hum of factory machines returned, slow, steady, precise. An old rule surfaced. Before restarting a broken line, let it cool completely. I whispered softly enough for only myself to hear, "All right, let the noise pass, Margaret." I walked out. Down the hallway, no one spoke. Outside, the last light of day fell on the sign, "Temporary Residence." The word residence still bled ink. I looked at it for a moment, then kept walking. When the noise stops, I will open that envelope, and I will make sure those who love arranging others finally learn what order truly means. That night, Long Beach felt quiet in an artificial way. After the neighbors' lights went out one by one, I realized the only thing still glowing in this house was Margaret's bedside lamp, the one she kept on through her final years because, as she said, warm light makes loneliness less visible. I sat at my desk, still in my vest, the envelope in my pocket radiating like a live wire. I pulled it out and set it on the table, my finger tracing the familiar line. "Open after the noise ends." Noah's laughter from that afternoon still rang in my head, and I knew the noise had truly ended. I opened the envelope. A faint scent of old paper, ink, and lotion rose. Inside were 3 things: a handwritten letter, a small silver USB drive, and a notarized photocopy of the Santa Ynez property title. I stared at the words, "Margaret L. Ashcroft, sole owner," feeling as if someone had just touched my heart. Beside it, a note. "No one knows about this place except me. If they turn away, go there." I read the letter first. The handwriting slanted evenly, the same careful script of the woman who had checked every monthly bill for 30 years. "Martin, when you read this, the Long Beach house may no longer be yours. Don't blame our daughter. Vanity spreads easily, and Sabrina has been breathing it in since she met Noah. Do you remember last year when she said, "You and Mom are old, you should let me handle things"? I laughed. But that night I took the deed out of the safe and had it re-notarized. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew. Greed begins when people think they deserve more than what they have. The Santa Ynez house I bought back from my parents' estate before we married. It was the last thing left after I sold the Ventura farm. I kept it in my name to avoid tax trouble and to secure our retirement. All the documents and assets are now under the Ashcroft Family Trust, with you as the sole beneficiary. Sabrina knows nothing about this, and you mustn't tell her. Silence is how justice protects itself. I created the Ashcroft Family Trust, listing you as beneficiary. The USB contains copies of everything: Santa Ynez property files, bank statements, and the lawyer's instructions. Her name is Jessica Rowan, office in Santa Barbara. If what I fear happens, find her, and don't get angry. A rational man never needs to shout. I love you, in the quiet way you taught me. At the bottom she signed, then added softly, "Justice doesn't need to be fast, only timed right." I laid the letter down and breathed deeply. The room smelled of paper and wood, but inside me everything lit up like the factory when the power returned after maintenance. I plugged in the USB. The folder appeared, every file labeled precisely as I would have done. EUNUT Trust Deed, PDF. Deutus Bank Statements. Euthopsias Attorney Rowan, PDF. Zipoweret Instructions, TXT. Opening the last file, I saw her step-by-step preparations. Asset lists, notarization dates, the Coastal Federal Bank Trust account naming Martin J. Ashcroft as sole beneficiary. I sat there, my heartbeat matching the clock's ticks. I saw Margaret in my mind last summer on the porch with her tea. Sabrina had just come home from Los Angeles, perfumed and distracted by her phone. You two should transfer everything before it's too late. At your age, probate is a nightmare. Margaret had smiled. You seem to care a lot about the law. Sabrina shrugged. I'm just being practical. That night, Margaret looked at me, half smile, half sorrow, and whispered, "If they see only money, you must see justice." Now, every piece fit. She had prepared everything, like a technician who knows a system will fail and sets aside spare parts. I printed 3 copies, the will, the title, the trust agreement. I stacked them into a folder and penciled a label. Phase 1, Evidence of Truth. My hands trembled not from fear, but from knowing a new shift was beginning, the final shift of my life. On the desk, Margaret's photo gleamed under the lamplight. Her eyes caught the reflection, alive again. I whispered, "I understand now, Margaret. You planned for both of us." I folded the letter and slipped it into my leather notebook. Outside, the waves beat steadily, the distant traffic faded. I turned off the lamp, leaving only the window light across the desk, where the letter still smelled of ink. That night, I did not sleep. I read every line of her instructions and scribbled a note, in tiny letters. Do not react. Let them believe you've given up. When they feel safest, that's when justice works best. Then I closed the book and wrote one last line. Tomorrow, I will call Jessica Rowan. Leaning back, I watched moonlight slide across the wall and glint off the metal desk, a pale, cold precision like tempered steel. From this moment on, I knew everything would run again, and this time, I was the one at the controls. The next morning, the first sunlight filtered through the thin curtains and fell across the desk piled with papers. Before I could reach for my coffee cup, my phone rang. The Santa Barbara number displayed Jessica Rowan, attorney at law. I inhaled, hearing Margaret's voice somewhere in my memory. If they turn their backs, find her, I answered. The woman's voice on the other end was calm, clear, and to the point. Mr. Ashcroft, this is Jessica Rowan. Margaret left instructions. I assume you opened the envelope? Yes, and the noise has just stopped, I said. Then let's begin. I need you to send all the original documents. I will schedule a meeting at the office this afternoon. 3 hours later, I drove the old Ford out of Long Beach along the coastal road. Santa Barbara appeared with its misty sea and tall palms, peaceful enough that no one would think it the starting point of a legal fight. Jessica's office was on the second floor of an old brick building. The frosted glass bore a small inscription, Estate and Probate Specialist. She appeared to be about 40, hair tied back, graceful with a steady gaze. When I set the file on her desk, she said nothing at first. She simply opened each page and skimmed, as someone used to stories, hidden beneath legal language. When she reached the will, she paused and looked up at me. Margaret was very thorough. She signed everything in the correct sequence, with 2 witnesses and an independent notary. This is a will that cannot be contested. I hesitated a moment, then added, Yesterday, at her funeral, my son-in-law grabbed the microphone and pointed at me in front of the cameras, saying, "The doghouse is still empty. It would suit you better." Jessica put down her pen and was quiet for a few seconds before she replied, "I've handled many property disputes, but I have never seen someone humiliate a relative like that in public." I gave a small smile. They think it was a joke. I regard it as the first piece of evidence in an ethical case. Jessica smiled, then opened her laptop. "I will file for immediate possession, your legal right of possession to the property. Along with that, we will submit an unlawful detainer against Sabrina and Noah for unlawful occupation. After that, I need your help collecting evidence." I opened my briefcase, took out a notebook, a pencil, and a sheet of labels. I supervised production lines for 30 years. I know how to manage a line. I will manage this case. Like a production line, each item, each record, each serial number. That afternoon, I returned home and first accessed the old camera system I had installed myself last year. The hard drive was still there, and no one had thought to check it. I rewound the footage of yesterday's funeral. At the 35-minute mark, Noah plainly appears holding the microphone, his voice ringing out. "The doghouse is still empty. Dad could live there. Just enough." The audio is clear, and the laughter of a few guests is audible. I clipped the segment and backed it up to a USB. Exhibit 1, Public Humiliation Video, 3:35 p.m., June 7th. Next, I opened Facebook. Sabrina posted a story, a photo of the handover corner captioned, "Temporary Residence, Clean and Cozy." I screenshot it and saved it as Exhibit 2, Social Media Post, June 7th, 4:02 p.m. Then I accessed the messages. In the family group chat, Sabrina wrote last night, "He'll understand gradually. We need to rebalance things. Mom paid for everything her whole life." I saved that as Exhibit 3, Admission of Financial Control. In the afternoon, I called Luis, the only man who dared look me in the eye yesterday. He answered right away. "Martin? I figured you'd need a witness. I saw everything. They did that at the funeral. It's unbelievable. I'll need you to sign a witness statement. I've printed the form. Just sign and confirm the time. Email it to me. I'll sign immediately." I phoned 2 other co-workers, Ms. Patel and Mr. Granger, both of whom had been present when Noah spoke, agreed to testify. 3 witnesses, 2 video records, 1 social post. A chain of evidence was in motion. I labeled each file. 01, Property Deed and Will, original certified copies. 02, Digital Exhibits, video, screenshots, chat logs. 03, Witness Statements, signed and notarized. 04, Bank Records, Ashcroft Family Trust, Coastal Federal. Each item went into its own folder, arranged side by side like perfectly meshing compressor stages. I missed nothing, not even exact times and dates. Late that night, I wrote Jessica an email. Subject, evidence ready for filing. Body. To Ms. Rowan, all documents have been encrypted and stored in a private drive. I also have 3 witnesses confirming the public humiliation and 1 copy of the social media post. I request a meeting tomorrow morning to sign the motion. Martin J. Ashcroft. After sending it, I turned off the lights and sat in the dark. The house still smelled of lilies. I looked up at Margaret's photo and smiled. She always said, "In the factory, when the system rattles, don't panic stop. Listen to find which part is failing." Now I have listened and know exactly where to tighten. I opened my leather notebook and wrote the line for the end of the day. Justice Production Line. Phase 1, complete. Tomorrow I will return to Santa Barbara, with evidence, witnesses, and a plan that makes no noise. 3 days after filing the lawsuit, I thought everything would stay quiet until the court issued a summons. But in this age, noise doesn't come from neighbors. It comes from the internet. That morning, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Messages from Luis, from Ms. Patel, even from old co-workers at the Aerodyne factory, all sent me the same link. "Have you seen this?" I opened it and saw a new video on Sabrina's page, posted 3 hours earlier. Title: When Dad Can't Let Go, The Truth About Our Family. The clip began with Sabrina's soft voice, piano music underneath, and text scrolling across the screen. This is the story of a father who couldn't accept aging and a mother who carried the family. Then came a montage, me in my old work clothes bent under a car, a shot of me dozing off in a garage chair, another of me fixing an outlet with greasy hands, all cut together with a faded filter and the caption, "Dad's Decline." At the end, Sabrina looked straight into the camera. My mother left a legacy, but sadly, my father is no longer lucid enough to manage it. We're only trying to help him. Doing what's right doesn't always mean being loved. The video lasted barely 3 minutes, but already had over 80,000 views, 12,000 comments, and was spreading through family advice and modern legacy circle groups. I scrolled through the top comments. "Poor girl, taking care of an old father must be hard. An elderly man with dementia and assets, that's a nightmare. She needs legal guardianship. Protect the daughter." I put the phone down. My mind went blank for a few seconds. Then I quietly reopened my notebook and wrote on a new page. Phase 2, Media Distortion. That afternoon, I went to Jessica's office. She had seen the video. "Don't respond yet," she said. "We don't argue with emotion, but if they've chosen a public arena, we'll answer with public truth." "I have something," I said. "If they want to show, I have the behind-the-scenes footage." That night, I powered on the computer and opened the Exhibit 2 folder. Besides the funeral recording, I still had a clip from the previous evening, after guests left. Noah on the porch, holding a glass of wine, voice slurred and arrogant. "You should know your place, Martin. Her mother made the money. You were just another bolt in someone else's machine. Now that she's gone, you're useless. Dead weight." I had recorded it out of bad instinct. Now it was perfect evidence. I converted the file to MP3 and named it Exhibit 5, Noah's Threat and Insult Recording. The next morning, Jessica sent me the response plan. We didn't post a video or reveal names. We simply emailed 3 local newspapers anonymously, attaching the audio, social media screenshots, and 3 witness statements. Not a single opinion, just data. 2 days later, the internet flipped. News headlines read, "Clip Dad was unfit, shows signs of editing." Leaked audio. Son-in-law insults father-in-law after funeral. Santa Barbara attorney confirms handling property seizure case. The hashtag Gotcha Justice for Martin spread fast, and Sabrina's video was mass reported. Public sympathy shifted from pity to outrage. I read the comments. "If that clip's real, she should be ashamed. They mocked their father at a funeral? Disgusting." That evening, Noah struck back. He went live from inside my house, from the living room where Margaret's portrait once hung. Sitting on my hand-painted wall sofa, white shirt, voice sharp with anger, he said, "It's all lies. He's obsessed with control, not sane. We didn't steal anything. We're cleaning up the mess. And let me be clear, he's dead weight. When he worked, he barely made a dime. Everything came from her mother. The live stream ran for nearly 20 minutes with over 50,000 viewers. Every sentence he spoke hammered his own reputation. Sabrina sat beside him, unable to meet the camera. Comments poured like a storm. Who talks that way about a father-in-law? Self-destruction in 4K. I didn't watch to the end. I just recorded the screen, noted the timestamp, and sent it to Jessica with the subject line. Live stream evidence. Noah's self-incrimination. Message body. He called me dead weight before 50,000 people. Nothing more needs saying. She replied within 10 minutes. Good. Stay silent. Every word he speaks is strengthening our defamation and emotional distress case. I turned off the computer and looked out the window. Long Beach glittered with city lights, but online the city was roaring. I didn't have to speak or defend myself. In that furnace of reputation, the loudest voice burns first. I opened my notebook and wrote the closing line. Not every silence is weakness. Some silences are programmed to wait for the final explosion. Then I closed the book. Outside, the waves kept striking the shore in steady rhythm, the same rhythm a machinist hears all his life. I knew the Justice production line had entered phase 2, and this time they were the gears grinding themselves to dust. 3 weeks after the social media storm, I received a message from Sabrina. Her tone was cold, but pretended to be conciliatory. Dad, I want to talk face to face. We're all tired. I just want to settle this peacefully. Attached was a digital invitation, professionally designed, white background with silver trim, italic title, The Family Transition, an evening of closure and appreciation. At the bottom in small print, private gathering, 7 p.m. at home. I read it twice. The way they used the word closure felt as if I had already died. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I texted Jessica. If they're setting a trap, I'll go, but not a word in response. I'll just observe. She answered curtly, Stay calm. Everything they do that night will become an exhibit. I arrived exactly on time. Light spilled from the Long Beach house like a birthday party. Not mourning, but a performance. Outside hung a banner reading, Family Transition, New Chapter Begins. Inside, soft music, clinking glasses, guests mostly Sabrina's friends, agents, investors, a few curious neighbors. A camera stood in the center of the room, lens aimed at the main table. Noah greeted me with a toothy smile. Glad you came, Dad. Tonight's just for everyone to understand each other better. Don't worry, no harsh words. I looked at him, then at Sabrina. She stood near the microphone, papers in hand. The camera light blinked red. I knew exactly where I was stepping. The event began with hollow gratitude speeches. Sabrina talked about necessary generational change, about a reasonable process of asset transition. Her tone even and professional, like reading a corporate report. Then she raised that sheet of paper and smiled thinly. Tonight, in front of everyone, I just want to clarify each family member's contributions, so there are no misunderstandings. The room went quiet. I saw Luis, my old neighbor, frowning by the door. Sabrina began reading. Margaret, the only woman who provided for the whole family. Noah handled arrangements, managed expenses, and maintained the home. And Dad, she paused, glanced at me, then continued, made no financial contribution during the last 10 years. But I believe Dad's love was a kind of emotional investment. A few soft laughs rippled through the room. Someone clinked a glass. Someone murmured, Nice touch. I looked around. They saw nothing wrong. To them it was gentle truth. To me, it was a dagger wrapped in silk. Noah stepped forward, energized like a host. And to mark transparency, today we'll announce the property plan. The house has been reappraised, and the sale contract is in progress. If not sold, it'll be rented long-term. He turned to me. You'll have temporary housing support. That's our final respect for you. Cameras snapped in bursts. One of their friends live-streamed it online with the caption, Modern Family, Courage to Face the Truth? Noah opened the safe in front of the guests. the safe I had built with my own hands. He pulled out a stack of documents and held them high. Here are the property papers. Legal, clear, transparent. No one's losing. The room applauded. Flashes went off. In the glass behind him I saw my reflection, an old man standing still amid applause, like a misplaced bronze statue. I didn't speak. I just observed every motion, the way Sabrina's fingers rested on the mic, the way Noah faced the camera, the way everyone smiled. It was all data. One of Sabrina's friends approached with a drink. "You're patient, Mr. Martin. I'd have flipped the table if someone said that to me." I smiled faintly. In a factory, when a line is overloaded, if you slam the table, the whole system crashes. I just wait for the red warning light. I turned and walked toward the door. Behind me, Sabrina kept talking about unity and direction. Her voice through the microphone distorted outside like a broken loudspeaker. On the porch, the sea breeze carried a faint smell of grease from the old garage. I paused, looked through the window. The safe was wide open. Noah signing something, Sabrina smiling at the camera. Luis came up, eyes red. "Martin, they've gone too far. What will you do?" I nodded. "They just signed their own confession. I don't have to do a thing." Then I walked away. No hurry, no backward glance. The door closed behind me. The noise still echoed but couldn't reach me anymore. On the drive home, I opened my notebook and wrote beneath Phase 3, Evidence. Public act of possession. Live stream, witnesses. Physical proof complete. The system is vibrating. I closed the book and took a deep breath. Somewhere in the dark, I could almost hear Margaret's whisper. "Don't be angry, Martin. Let them flip the switch themselves." I smiled. Yes, let them. When the circuit burns out, I'll just stand by and sign the order to restart justice. The morning in Santa Ynez was so clear, it felt as though sorrow had never existed. I sat in the villa Margaret left behind, the early sunlight streaming through the glass windows and reflecting on the neatly arranged files across the wooden table. Everything was ready for the next phase, no longer emotion but procedure. At exactly 9 o'clock, I arrived at Jessica Rowan's office in Santa Barbara. She was standing before a whiteboard, her battle plan already written in marker. 1. Probate petition, estate of Margaret L. Ashcroft. 2. Request for immediate possession, Long Beach property. 3. Unlawful detainer, action, Sabrina and Noah, unauthorized occupants. 4. Evidence packet AD, filed under seal. Jurisdiction, Los Angeles County Probate Division, she said. I'll file this morning. Sabrina and Noah will be served within 72 hours. From that moment, the legal clock starts ticking. I nodded, looking at the thick sealed folder on her desk. The cover read clearly, "In the matter of the estate of Margaret L. Ashcroft, petition for probate and immediate possession." "How long until the hearing?" I asked. Normally, the court responds in 10 to 14 days, but because this is an emergency possession request, I'll attach a motion to expedite. If the judge approves, we could be in court within 7 days. That afternoon, as soon as the petition was filed, a court clerk called to confirm. Preliminary hearing date, August 12th. I marked it in my notebook. Probate hearing T-minus 7 days. 3 days later, Sabrina and Noah were officially served. I wasn't there, but Jessica recounted it. They were stunned, especially when they saw the file included the video, the audio recording, and 3 independent witness statements. I replied quietly. They thought the stage was theirs. Now the spotlight has shifted. Yet as Jessica predicted, 2 days later, they struck back. One morning she called, voice calm but slower. They've hired a new attorney, Richard Stone, specialist in probate contests. They just filed a motion to delay, claiming you're mentally incompetent, emotional instability, and cognitive decline. I chuckled softly, not in surprise, but in recognition, the laugh of someone who expected the move long before it came. Their grounds? They're citing that edited video Sabrina posted, claiming memory loss and erratic behavior, And they have a witness, a neighbor named Eleanor Shaw, who swore she saw you pacing and talking to yourself in the yard. I looked out the window. Golden light spilled across the vineyard. Margaret once said, "When they run out of arguments, they'll attack your mind." "They forget I managed hundreds of workers," I murmured. "I have annual medical reports and neurological assessments." Jessica smiled. "I anticipated that. I've contacted your neurologist in Long Beach, Dr. Marcus Allen, who examined you last year. He's agreed to sign a medical competency statement. I'm also drafting a motion to strike claim of incompetency. Still, the court will require an independent psychological evaluation for objectivity." I nodded, unfazed. "When?" "The court will issue the order within 48 hours. You'll take the evaluation at the appointed specialist's office here in Santa Barbara. Once we have the results, I'll file them immediately." That night, I drew the process out in my notebook like a technical diagram. Justice Production Line, Phase 2, System Inspection. Step 1, File Petition, completed. Step 2, Defendant Reaction, completed. Step 3, Competency Evaluation, pending. Step 4, Counter-motion proof, in preparation. I pinned a copy of the probate petition beside Margaret's photo and wrote beneath it, "August 12th, justice will appear." 2 days later, just as Jessica said, I received the court's letter. Order for psychological evaluation, pursuant to probate code, paragraph 810 to 812. Location, Office of Dr. Sarah Mitchell, court-appointed psychologist. Deadline for submission, before August 10th. I prepared as if for a safety inspection, medical clearance, last year's memory assessment, and 2 witness statements from Luis and Ms. Patel, affirming I was fully lucid, independent, and financially competent. On August 8th, I entered Dr. Mitchell's office. The room was bright, scented with lavender and fresh paper. She smiled. Politely, "I'm asked to verify your cognitive capacity. I hope this doesn't bother you." "I'm used to tests," I said. 30 years as a supervisor, safety, reflex, and logic exams every quarter. This is just another test of humanity." The evaluation lasted 2 hours. She asked about memory, time, and current events. I answered each clearly, slowly, precisely. When she requested I write a sentence of my choice, I wrote, "Justice doesn't need to shout. It only needs someone lucid enough to hear its arrival." She smiled and nodded. That afternoon, I called Jessica. "Evaluation complete." "Good. They can't stall forever. Once the results arrive, I'll file them with the counter-motion and the medical certification. Then we wait for August 12th. I hung up and watched the sunset behind the vineyard hills. The air in Santa Ynez was cool and still, but inside me, every gear of the justice machinery was turning. No noise, no arguments, only a legal system running on the rhythm I designed. Precise, cold, flawless. Before bed, I wrote in my notebook, "Phase 4, counter-motion in progress. They want to prove I've lost my mind. I'll prove they've lost their morals." Because memory may fade, but integrity never blurs. I will show the court that incompetence is not when the mind slows. It's when the conscience still functions, yet crushes the one who gave you life. They can forge witnesses, hire lawyers, and edit videos, but they can never buy back the respect they sold in front of a crowd. I don't need to prove I'm clever, only that I still have a conscience, and they do not. On August 10th, 2 days before the probate hearing, I received a message from Jessica. They just leaked an article in the local paper. Brace yourself. I opened the link. The front page of the Long Beach Daily Chronicle screamed, 72-year-old senile man fights to reclaim home from his own daughter. Beneath it was a candid photo of me, taken secretly in the garage 2 months earlier while I was bent under the hood changing a spark plug. The light had been intentionally flattened, making me look lost and confused. The article was full of half-truths and distortions, quoting a close family source who claimed I was verbally aggressive and no longer aware of his assets. I read slowly, each line like a cold blade. At the end it was signed, Story in cooperation with Noah Bennett, financial advisor, son-in-law of the subject. I smiled. That name had just stepped into the no-exit zone. 3 hours later, Jessica emailed me. They've made a mistake. Public defamation equals open gate for lawful counterstrike. She attached a media response strategy with 3 points. 1. Release verified facts. 2. Trigger an independent investigative press. 3. Let Noah collapse under the media weight he created. The next day, Jessica issued an official press statement from her firm to every regional outlet. It listed the evidence already filed with the court. The audio of Noah calling me dead weight, the live stream where he humiliated his father-in-law before 50,000 viewers, and internal messages admitting plans to sell or rent the house without ownership rights. The release ended with 2 sentences sharp as steel. Any defamatory claims against our client will be measured against verified evidence in court. Justice doesn't chase cameras. Cameras chase justice. 2 days later, the tide turned. Santa Barbara Investigative News aired a segment titled, Who's Lying in the Ashcroft House Case? Reporter Megan Doyle publicly compared 2 videos, the edited clip Sabrina posted and my original footage. Technical analysis revealed background noise levels differ, light transitions misaligned with timestamps, clear evidence of tampering. Megan also traced banking data. Noah had taken 3 personal loans totaling $240,000 for a financial consulting firm. Funds later spent on an Audi Q8, a Maldives resort, and 2 Bora Bora trips. She closed her report with the line, If he's truthful about ethics and stability, why do the loan dates match his mother-in-law's funeral? The story spread like wildfire. I sat in the Santa Ynez Villa, watching the headlines ripple across the web. Smaller outlets, finance podcasts, and even investor forums cited Noah Bennett as the prime example of ethical collapse in the advisory field. 3 days later, the California Financial Ethics Board released an official notice. Temporary suspension of financial advisor license for Noah Bennett for 90 days pending investigation into dishonesty and potential fraud. I felt no joy, no anger, only a silence as deep as the sea, the kind of silence justice makes when it finally begins to move. That night, Noah went live again, this time stripped of arrogance. He insisted it was a misunderstanding, claimed the media were manipulated, yet his face trembled and his voice cracked. The comments poured in like a storm. Stop lying. You were caught. Don't blame your father-in-law. Explain the loans. The man who called his father-in-law dead weight just became one. I watched for a while, then turned off the screen. In the lamplight, I wrote in my notebook, The loudest man has been swallowed by his own echo. Jessica called moments later, calm as ever. See? This is why I told you. Say nothing. Let them light the torch that exposes themselves. I answered softly. In the factory, when a system explodes, people blame the machinery. But really, it's the operator who forgot the safety code. She laughed. Quiet, sharp. Exactly. And all we'll do is file the report. The media will handle the rest. The following day, the press made it official. Noah Bennett permanently stripped of financial advisor credentials for ethical violations. His contracts were terminated. His office shuttered. Long Beach buzzed with the news. I said nothing, just stepped onto the veranda and looked toward the distant sea. The waves kept their rhythm. Only his reputation had been swept away, fast and clean. In my legal journal, I wrote the final line. They tried to strike me with the media, but forgot. Media is a double-edged blade. One side cuts truth, the other cuts the hand that wields it. On August 12th, morning fog veiled Los Angeles in a thin silver layer. I woke at 5, brewed a cup of black coffee, adjusted my tie, and drove down into the city. On the passenger seat lay a thick file, neatly clipped, in a black folder, labeled in white print. Exhibits A.E., Estate of Margaret L. Ashcroft. I had prepared hundreds of technical reports in my life, but never had my heart beat so slow and steady as it did that day. The probate courthouse in downtown Los Angeles was already lit. Outside, dozens of reporters waited. As I stepped out of the car, flashes exploded and voices rose. "Mr. Martin, any comment on the case against your daughter?" "Do you think you'll win?" I didn't respond. I simply walked through the marble hallway, file in hand, eyes forward. Justice doesn't need to speak. It only needs to be recorded. Courtroom 207 was bright and cold. At the plaintiff's table, Jessica stood ready and nodded when she saw me. Across the aisle sat Sabrina and Noah beside their lawyer, Richard Stone, a gray-haired man with a loud voice and the swagger of someone who treats every hearing as his private stage. And when Judge Valerie Kent entered, everyone rose. She was from Chicago, known for her discipline and dislike of media spectacle. She scanned the files and said, "Today's session is preliminary to determine the validity of the probate petition and the emergency possession request. I will hear both sides." Jessica began, calm and precise. "Your Honor, this concerns property lawfully owned by the late Margaret L. Ashcroft. My client, Mr. Martin Ashcroft, is the sole heir under a notarized will kept at Berman and Associates since 2022. She presented the evidence one by one: the original will, Santa Ynez title certificate, audio of Noah's insults and threats, funeral footage, and 3 independent witness statements, each document numbered and projected on the large screen. The judge nodded, noting every exhibit, then turned to the defense. "Mr. Stone, your response?" Stone rose, voice booming. "Your Honor, the plaintiff is exploiting an elderly man suffering mental decline to seize control of property. Our evidence shows Mr. Ashcroft displays delusional and unstable behavior. We have a witness, Mrs. Eleanor Shaw, who saw him wandering at night, talking to himself." Mrs. Shaw, a middle-aged woman in a floral blouse, was called to the stand. "Please explain," said the judge. "I live next door," she said. "I saw him a few times outside, arguing with no one. I thought he wasn't right." Jessica approached, tone sharp as ice. "Mrs. Shaw, do you recall the exact date?" "Not really. Maybe June." "Did you know that was the day of his wife's funeral, and he was speaking to her ashes?" The room went silent. Mrs. Shaw paled, stammering, I didn't know." Jessica held up a paper. "This is your signed interview transcript with reporter Noah Bennett, taken 2 days before, confirming a $500 payment to verify impressions. Tell me plainly, did Mr. Bennett pay you?" I just thought I was helping." The judge's gavel struck hard. "Sit down, witness. The court will review your false statement later." Noah lowered his head. Sabrina's face drained of color. Jessica continued, "Your Honor, we also submitted a certified psychological report from Dr. Sarah Mitchell, confirming my client is fully lucid and legally competent." The judge reviewed it and nodded. "The court hereby recognizes the validity of the will and Mr. Martin Ashcroft's representative authority. The property will remain under protective custody until final judgment. However, since the defense filed a new objection, both sides have 10 days to submit additional evidence. Formal trial date, August 22nd. The gavel struck again. Outside, the press swarmed. As Jessica and I exited, Sabrina waited in the corridor, fury distorting her face. "You think you've won?" she screamed, her voice echoing. "You've lived off me and Mom your whole life." A loud click. A camera captured the scene. Judge Kent happened to pass by, her tone cutting. "Mrs. Ashcroft, you just committed contempt of court. I'll instruct the clerk to issue a fine of $1,000. The hallway froze. Sabrina gaped, speechless, as Noah pulled her away. That evening, the headlines read, "Court grants temporary ownership to Martin Ashcroft. Daughter and son-in-law reprimanded in session. Comments erupted. The father stays calm. The daughter loses control. Only the guilty fear silence. I sat in my car, city lights flickering on the windshield. In my pocket, the Parker pen is still warm, a quiet reminder from Margaret. I opened my notebook and wrote the last line of the day. Phase 6, the system acknowledged. Justice had not yet spoken, but it had already chosen its side. Then I closed the book softly. August 22nd, I knew that would be the day when the justice machinery reached full heat. On August 22nd, the Los Angeles probate court was packed. Every row was filled with reporters, cameras, and curious onlookers. The story of a father stripped of his home by his daughter and son-in-law, who fought back through the law, had spread across the state. I sat still at the plaintiff's table, before me a perfectly labeled file set. Exhibits A through H. Morning light fell through the window and landed directly on the Parker pen I had placed on the desk. The same one Margaret once said symbolized everything she believed. The truth will right itself, as long as you have the patience to hold the pen. Judge Valerie Kent entered, and silence sliced through the air. She began firmly, "Today the court convenes for the official trial of the estate of Margaret L. Ashcroft. Both parties have submitted full evidence, witnesses, and professional assessments. The court will now hear final statements." Jessica stood and adjusted her papers. "Your Honor, we will proceed in 3 parts: ownership, conduct, and financial integrity." On the large screen appeared Exhibit A, the notarized original will, bearing Margaret's signature and those of 2 witnesses. This is a valid will confirming that sole inheritance belongs to Mr. Martin Ashcroft. Next came Exhibit B, the title certificate of the Santa Ynez property, transferred into the Ashcroft Family Trust in September 2022. Undeniable proof that Mrs. Margaret foresaw this situation, making my client the rightful beneficiary. Then she turned to Exhibit D, the past 8-month bank statements of Sabrina and Noah, certain entries highlighted in red. This data from California Mutual Bank, verified by forensic auditor Douglas Crane, shows that $128,000 were withdrawn from the joint Ashcroft Legacy account, originally funded by Mrs. Margaret, 3 weeks after her death. The sum was never reported in any tax filing. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Jessica continued. Additionally, our forensic accountant confirmed that Noah Bennett used $92,000 from a company loan for personal expenses, resorts, and luxury vehicles, unrelated to any legitimate business. She then played the recording. Noah's voice echoed through the room. "You'd better know your place, Martin. Now that she's dead, you're useless. Dead weight." The courtroom froze. Only the cold playback remained, and the sound of restrained breathing. Judge Kent turned toward the defense, her gaze like ice. "Mr. Bennett, is that your voice?" Noah swallowed hard, face burning. I spoke in anger." Jessica cut in at once. "Threatening and insulting a lawful heir, recorded, preserved, and time-stamped, constitutes intimidation in a civil case and potential criminal conduct." The judge nodded slowly, tone firm. "The court recognizes the audio as lawful evidence and will forward it to the district attorney's office for review of possible charges of perjury, intimidation, and fraud." The gavel struck, thud, a sharp, chilling sound. Sabrina trembled, lips pale. Below, reporters scribbled furiously. Jessica pressed on. "Your Honor, my client seeks no material compensation, only restoration of dignity and rightful ownership. Yet given the extent of deceit and unlawful appropriation, we request that Mr. Noah Bennett be taken into custody to ensure a proper criminal investigation." The judge turned to the clerk, each word crisp. "Under California Probate Code, Section 850, and based on evidence presented, this court issues an emergency order. Mr. Noah Bennett is to be remanded immediately to custody pending criminal inquiry." The room seemed to freeze solid. Then came the echo of boots. 2 sheriff's deputies entered, cuffs glinting under the lights. Noah leapt up, shouting, "No, I did nothing wrong. This is a setup. Sabrina, say something." Sabrina stood rooted, tears streaking her heavily made-up face. Camera flashes erupted. A reporter shouted, "They're cuffing him right here in court." The metallic click of handcuffs rang out, steel against skin reverberating in the air. Noah struggled, but the deputies held firm. Television cameras captured everything, and within moments, the footage swept across the internet. Sabrina panicked, running after him, screaming, "It's your fault, Noah! I didn't know anything!" The courtroom doors shut. Only sobs and blinding flashes remained. Judge Kent scanned the room and struck her gavel once more. The court hereby awards full ownership of all Long Beach and Santa Ynez properties and all Ashcroft Family Trust accounts to Mr. Martin Ashcroft. Court is adjourned. I said nothing. I simply bowed my head to her, then looked to the empty chair across the aisle, where Noah had sat. Outside, reporters swarmed. Sabrina collapsed on the courthouse steps. Mascara streaked, whispering through sobs, "I only wanted to help my father. I never meant this to happen." But no one listened anymore. Online, the video of Noah being handcuffed in court reached over 3 million views within 6 hours. Headlines blazed, from son-in-law who humiliated his father-in-law to being handcuffed in court. Public justice, when truth needs no microphone. I returned to Santa Ynez that evening. The sun dipped behind the vineyards, golden light glinting off the Parker pen. I sat, opened my notebook, and wrote the final line for that day of reckoning. Phase 7, the circuit complete. Public humiliation had been reversed by the light of law. Then I closed the notebook and drew a long breath. For the first time in months, the house was so quiet I could hear the wind moving through the pines. Justice does not need revenge. It only needs to be seen, before everyone under the light and on the wrists of the man who once called me dead weight. 3 days after the trial, at exactly 5 o'clock in the afternoon on August 25th, the Judicial Enforcement Team returned to the Long Beach property to execute the eviction order. I stood across the street, leaning against my old pickup truck, silently watching everything unfold, like a scene from a film in which I was both the victim and the writer. The California sun glinted off the white fence, reflecting against the sign that read, "Ashcroft Estate, since 1984. 39 years of history, and today, justice officially closed a chapter." 2 officers knocked on the door. No answer. 5 minutes later, they opened it with a court order. Sabrina and Noah appeared at the threshold, both pale, hollow-eyed, disheveled. Sabrina clutched a small suitcase. Noah carried 2 boxes, old papers and newspapers spilling down the steps. A reporter from the Los Angeles Times stood ready, camera rolling, capturing the moment. Sabrina looked at me. For the first time since the funeral, her voice trembled. "Dad, I know it's too late to say sorry." I didn't reply. The officer reminded them, "By court order, you have 15 minutes to vacate the premises." Noah turned, scanning the house he once believed was his. He gave a bitter laugh. "You won, old man. Hope the house talks to you better than I ever did." Then he tossed the keys down the steps, the sound sharp as metal. Inside, most of the furniture was gone. Only a few broken frames, my morning coffee mug, and a small note lay on the living room floor. I entered once the officers finished their work. The note, written in Sabrina's shaky hand, read, "We're gone. Sorry if that still means anything." Besides it, their phone still recorded, a short farewell clip they had planned to post online. In it, Sabrina struggled to keep calm, saying, "Everyone, today we're leaving the home that once belonged to our family. Maybe we were wrong, but justice isn't always pure white. I hope one day my father understands." Behind her, Noah sat silent, head bowed. The video ended with a shake and then went dark. Within hours, that clip spread across social media. Headlines flared. Couple evicted from Santa Ynez mansion after shocking family case. Collapse of the social legacy generation, when fame can't save greed. That evening, Jessica called. Noah's investors have pulled out. 2 real estate firms cut ties. He's filing for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. His license? I asked. Suspended. And by regulation, he could still face federal fraud charges. Sabrina fared no better. Within a week, every cosmetics endorsement and media deal was canceled. Her name appeared under public liabilities. Those dropped for ethical scandals. Her job applications leaked online, mocked by strangers. She withdrew from social media. Her Instagram disappeared. Her YouTube channel, Modern Legacy, once full of motivational videos about creating your own opportunities, now bore only a cold message. This channel is no longer available. 3 weeks later, the Santa Barbara Chronicle reported, former real estate consultant Noah Bennett files for bankruptcy amid allegations of falsified records and misuse of private investment funds. Federal court reviewing case. I read that article sitting in the now quiet house. Afternoon light filtered through the window, falling over the wall where Margaret once hung our vineyard photo. Only the empty wooden frame remained, dust settling in a thin layer. I sat in the chair, looking around. No laughter, no footsteps, no bright lights from live streams, only wind slipping through the cracks and the scent of old timber. The feeling of victory came like a cold breeze, clean, decisive, but leaving a void behind. I had won, through law, through evidence, through truth. But in return, I had lost a piece of my family's memory. I opened the old drawer where Margaret once hid her first envelope. Inside was her handwritten note. If one day the silence feels frightening, remember, it is an emptiness. It's peace. I placed it back and gently shut the drawer. Outside, the officers were gone, neighbors watching quietly from behind curtains. The house stood there, intact, yet irrevocably changed. I took out my notebook and wrote, Phase 8, The Cost of Justice. Sunset spread slowly across the floor, its golden light pooling like oil on an old workbench. I leaned back and smiled faintly. Victory sometimes doesn't sound like applause. It only whispers, it's over. 3 months after the police left Santa Ynez, the villa had returned to its original stillness. I spent several weeks cleaning, replacing lights, fixing the roof, and rehanging Margaret's old photograph. But the longer I stayed, the clearer it became. This house was no longer a place to live. It was a monument to a battle already fought. The walls knew too much. The steps still carried the footprints of betrayal. I didn't want Margaret's memory to be trapped there. So I decided to sell the Santa Ynez house. The buyers were a young couple, a teacher and an electrical engineer, who said they wanted a place to rebuild a beginning. I signed the papers, feeling lighter, as if cutting away a dead weight. The proceeds were wired directly into a new account I'd created, the Ashcroft Foundation for Skilled Workers. Margaret used to say, a person who works with their hands and keeps their honor still stands higher than one who deceives with words. I stayed true to that spirit. The foundation would fund scholarships for students in mechanical, electrical, and construction trades, those willing to build something real instead of chasing an image. I called it the Second-Hand Project, symbolizing life's second chance. From what remained of Margaret's investments, I bought a small villa in Malibu overlooking the Pacific. Not as grand as Santa Ynez, but brighter, full of light, peaceful. I rebuilt my old workspace, placed my notebook, the Parker pen, and the photo of Margaret smiling by the vineyard. Every morning I made coffee, stepped onto the balcony to watch the sunrise, and wrote a few lines in the foundation's journal. For the first time in years, I felt I wasn't living for revenge, but for continuation. 1 December. Morning, Sabrina appeared. She stood at the gate, no makeup and old coat, a letter in hand. Her eyes were different, No arrogance, only exhaustion. I opened the gate and looked at her quietly. "What do you want to say?" I asked. She handed me the envelope. "Dad, I know I can't change the past, but I want to start over. I'm sorry." I didn't take it right away. "Sorry for what?" I asked. "For everything, for kicking you out, for letting Noah humiliate you, for not believing Mom, not believing in family." Her voice broke. "I understand now. Money, fame, followers, none of it saves anyone." I looked at my daughter, not the Sabrina who once stood in white dresses before cameras, but a woman who had fallen deep and hard. "If you really want to start over," I said, "then do it through action, not tears." I pulled a printed page from my pocket and placed it in her hand. "Join the Ashcroft Fund for 12 months. Work as a project assistant, unpaid, 8 hours a day alongside the mechanics, helping apprentices. After that, write a public essay about responsibility and gratitude. Then we'll talk about forgiveness." She froze, looked at the paper, then nodded. "I agree. I'll do it." I stepped aside, opened the gate, letting her walk into the yard. Morning light poured gold over the pots Margaret once tended. Sabrina stopped and said softly, "Mom would be proud of you." I smiled faintly, saying nothing. 2 months later, Sabrina began working for the foundation. She learned to listen, to take notes, and to help the engineering team train students. For the first time, she knew what it meant to get her hands dirty with machine grease, to do something without a camera watching. On the main wall of the training center, I hung a metal plaque engraved, "For those who build, not those who destroy." The foundation's first opening ceremony was simple yet warm. 13 students received the first scholarships, young tradesmen with rough hands and bright eyes. The press attended, but this time there were no scandals, no flashing lights, only genuine applause. That night, I sat in my small office looking out toward the sea. Moonlight spread across the water in a thin silver line, like oil shimmering on a factory floor long ago. I opened my notebook and wrote the final line of the day. "Justice can return what was lost, but only compassion can make it matter." I closed the book and turned off the light. Outside, the waves beat steadily, like the heartbeat of someone long gone. Margaret once said, "The ending isn't when we win, it's when we begin to rebuild with clean hands." And tonight, I knew I had truly begun. The morning in Malibu was as gentle as a song without words. The wind drifted in from the ocean, carrying a trace of salt that blended with the aroma of freshly roasted coffee. I sat in a small cafe along the Pacific Coast Highway, the same one Margaret loved to stop at whenever we passed by. On the table were 2 steaming cups of coffee, one for me, the other untouched across from me. Sabrina arrived 10 minutes late. She walked in thinner than before, her hair tied up, wearing a plain white shirt. No makeup, no trace of the social media glow. Just my daughter, who now walked toward the table quietly and asked, "May I sit?" I nodded. She sat, holding her cup, but not drinking. Her voice was small, trembling. "Noah has been moved to the county jail. They said he'll face 2 more charges. I never thought it would go this far." I looked toward the sea, silent. The waves rolled in one after another like the ticking of time. "Things went that far," I said calmly, "because you 2 never knew when to stop." Sabrina lowered her head. "I know, and I understand you have every right to never forgive me. But I still need to say this. I'm sorry. Not to ask for pity. Just so you know, I understand what I destroyed." I looked at her for a long while. Her eyes were clear of calculation. For the first time, she wasn't speaking to be accepted. She was speaking to be freed. I set my cup down and said slowly, "Forgiveness isn't erasing, it's stopping before hatred kills what's left of you." She looked up, startled. "Does that mean you forgive me?" "It means," I said, "we move on without speaking of it again. If you truly want to make amends, keep working for the foundation. Help someone else, not me. Forgiveness doesn't need a speech. It needs action." She nodded, eyes red. We sat in silence, hearing only the faint clink of the coffee spoon. When Sabrina stood, she whispered, "I know Mom would smile today." I watched her walk into the morning light. I stayed a while longer, sipping the now cold coffee. The anger was gone, replaced by a quiet emptiness, gentle as the calm after a storm. Down the highway, the Ashcroft Foundation's work truck drove past, heading to a new project, installing the sign for Workshop for Veterans, a full circle. That afternoon, I returned to the villa. The living room glowed. Wind stirred the white curtains. The air carried wood and coffee. On the desk lay my open leather notebook. I picked up my pen and wrote the final line of my life as a worker, a husband, a father. Justice doesn't need to shout. It needs preparation. I closed the notebook and looked out back. In the garden corner stood the old doghouse Noah had mocked me with at the funeral. It had been dismantled, the planks straightened, repainted, and repurposed by the Foundation's crew to build a school desk for orphans. A symbol transformed, like the way I chose to end my life as a father, not with curses, but by rebuilding from ashes. I took the wedding ring from my pocket, still stained with machine oil I'd never washed off. For the first time, I rinsed it under warm water. The oil dissolved, the silver shone again. I set the ring beside Margaret's photo. Sunset covered the room in soft gold. Outside, the sea was calm and the palms swayed. I leaned back and whispered, "It's all done now, my love." The final image closed on the reflection of light glinting off the ring, a small, steady glow, a reminder that justice doesn't need to scream. It stays with those patients enough not to become what they fought against. I tell this story not for sympathy, but to remind you of one truth. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive with shouting. It arrives with patience, one piece of evidence, one signature, one father choosing silence at the right moment. I was humiliated before hundreds, called dead weight, and driven out of the house I built. But I didn't fight with anger or revenge. I let the law and time do their work, and in the end, the truth spoke for itself. Today, this villa echoes with the sound of drills, hammers, and young apprentices learning trades, the sounds of real rebirth. And I, just sitting in my corner, drink my old coffee, watch the sea, and remind myself, justice doesn't need fury. It only needs preparation. And when it comes, it asks permission from no one. If you've ever been looked down on, pushed out by your own family, or chosen silence believing truth has its own voice, leave a single dot in the comments so I'll know you once stood up, in silence. And if you believe justice doesn't need to scream to be heard, subscribe, because I have more stories to tell of those who were humiliated but rose again when the light returned at the right time, in the right way.